Welcome to today's episode. We are going to talk about the Bretton Woods Agreement and how it changed forever the way products and goods were bought and sold around the world. The Bretton Woods Agreement was a result of World War II. After the war ended, a lot of countries were in a state of absolute chaos. Europe was decimated. There was a lot of physical damage, emotional damage, and absolutely economic damage. And the world powers, which is basically the European leaders, the UK, the United States, and Japan, kind of came together and they wanted to make an agreement that would prevent World War III from happening. Because unfortunately, after World War I, Germany was left in this very difficult situation. They had a lot of debt. So the money that they sort of made after World War I, majority of it had to go repay this debt. And that left a lot of Germans frustrated and upset, which kind of created this populist movement, a lot of inflation, economic hardships. That kind of gave the Nazis the perfect sort of opportunity to step in, kind of take over. So the world leaders after World War II did not want to make that same mistake again. So they got together in New Hampshire at the Bretton Woods Hotel. The town was Bretton Woods. The hotel was the Mount Washington Hotel. And they made this agreement that essentially determined or set the U.S. dollar to be the global reserve currency. And what that means is all sort of products, goods, services, oil are priced and paid for in dollars. So it just kind of gave one standard currency for everything to be bought and sold in. And this agreement kind of lasted for a very long time. It really helped the 1950s be this era of prosperity. And the results of this gave some countries an advantage, namely these countries that were recovering from the war. So it's like Germany, for example, Japan. They were given the opportunity to manufacture products and sell them to Americans. So the U.S. was opened up as a market to buy goods, kind of created the beginning of our sort of consumerism culture. That was kind of done by design as a response to World War II. And the dollar was the reserve currency, so that meant that all these products were bought and sold in dollars, which helped the strength of the dollar. Kind of led to this situation of dollar dominance that we've had pretty much ever since then. And that means that goods in other countries, like Japan, for example, were very affordable to Americans because the dollar was strong and the yen was weaker. And that helped these countries who were in a tough spot recover from the war. Now, the consequence, though, to the United States, and this sort of hit more in the 70s, was as the dollar grew stronger and stronger over a long period of time to the situation we're in now, it made it really expensive for American-made products to be purchased overseas, which is why a lot of American manufacturing has kind of have left. That kind of built over time. But the Bretton Woods Agreement also said that there was going to be fixed exchange rates between all of the currency of the world, and the dollar was sort of like the base, and that was exchangeable for an equal amount of gold, $35 an ounce. So if you had a bunch of dollars and you wanted to trade them in for gold, you were theoretically able to do that anytime you wanted. Now, the United States spent a lot of money in the late 60s, early 70s on the Vietnam War and Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, which is a social program. And unfortunately, or whatever, the reality is that the United States spent way more money than they had in gold. And some countries kind of figured this out and got nervous that they weren't going to be able to exchange all of their dollars for gold. So France actually called the U.S.'s bluff and sent over this large ship to the U.S. asking or demanding or whatever the exchange of all of their dollars for gold. And the U.S. knew it didn't have enough for everyone and all of the dollars to change in. So President Nixon kind of closed what they called the gold window. He ended the agreement where the U.S. was honoring that exchange rate and that kind of ended this era of Bretton Woods. And after that point, we got onto the petrodollar, which we'll have a separate video for. But this idea of Bretton Woods is basically summarized by the dollar is the global reserve currency. The dollar is pegged to a fixed value of gold. All other currencies are tied to the US dollar at a specific exchange rate. And the intent was to enable a lot of countries who had suffered in World War II to rebuild so we could have this kind of prosperous global system. Now, there were consequences that kind of came much, much later, which we'll cover in another video, but there's been some chatter this year about potentially a Bretton Woods 3 agreement. So before we kind of get into what might happen now in 2022 and beyond, I thought it was helpful to explain the original Bretton Woods Agreement and who was involved. I have this little infographic too if you want to check it out. And I'll also post that infographic in the comments. All right, we'll see you in the next video.